Good day, everybody. Welcome to the CEO Mastermind.ai podcast show, the Management OS. Today, I'm joined by a friend of mine, Braden Young. He is the co-founder of Slash Experts, and he's a seasoned go-to-market strategist. He's helped companies of all sizes, from small to enterprise. And I think where we really connected is really about a human-first growth engine perspective. Obviously, we talk a lot about systems and humanity, health optimizations, and all those things on the show. But in a world where AI is transforming how we connect, Brian reminds us, and when you filled out the form for this podcast, it's what really got my attention. And I think everyone should really pay attention. People still buy from people. So yes, we have all this fast growing tech and all these sorts of things, but at the end of the day, it's like people buy from people. And how do we not sacrifice our culture, our health, and our humanity? And so, if you're a founder, executive, whether you lead a sort of 6-figure or a 9-figure organization, you always want to keep your business grounded in relationship and resilience. And, we're going to have a conversation about that today, and, Braden's company, what he does and his journey. And so super excited for this and I appreciate you joining us today, Braden. So thanks for joining the Management OS podcast.
Yeah, it's good to be here. It's funny, I'm not sure when we were just chatting about having kids, like when I became a seasoned go-to-market professional, right? I feel like it's one of those things where I'm like, when did I spend 20 years in go-to-market? I feel like I was just like an SDR cold calling yesterday, trying to make it work with 50 dials a day.
Yeah, exactly. But the old phones, some people don't know what those rotary phones
Oh
are.
yeah. I mean, that's when like Salesforce had just come out and like it was we hated it, but it was one of those things where it was like at least helpful because you'd be like, oh, I already called that person.
Yeah. So much has changed.
Yeah.
So thanks for coming on. And so kind of like you said, want to dive into a little bit about your philosophy and your experience. And really, people still buy from people. So I
Yeah.
think with technology, there's it's so easy to get lost in all this stuff and agentic and robots and get scared and afraid or whatever. But I love you said that people still buy from people. And so,
Yeah.
can you talk a little bit about blending this all in your
Yeah, I'll
approach?
give you kind of a quick background like on like who I am too. So I good to market for a long time. I founded my first company about 15 years ago or so, and it was a company called Sendoso. So it was a way to send gifts to individuals, and gifts used in the sales cycle, used in the customer success life cycle, and like it was really just using the power of reciprocity and trying to build relationships over sending gifts to individuals. And that's kind of where I had my first I guess gifts work. Like building relationships is one of those things that helps in the world of business. And my next company, which is Slash Experts, what we do is we connect a prospect to a customer as the very first step in the sales cycle. So as more and more B2B sites change, or even B2C sites change, and it's always been like, hey, book a demo. A demo is like that should be your first step in sales. Your first step looking at software is take a demo. But most of us don't trust sales. I think sales is one of those where they're incentivized to sometimes sell you a product that isn't a right fit for you. Not everybody, but a lot of time, like that's the incentive. And so you read reviews to try to avoid that. And it just doesn't work now. And so like our thesis is, let's connect you with somebody who's already using that product. Let's connect you with an expert or a customer to have a conversation as to, hey, like why they buy it. Is it working? Almost like peer-to-peer led selling. And we're seeing that work really well. We're seeing that speed up sales cycles. We're seeing you bring on better customers. We see it used a lot on deals that are more than at least $5,000 ARR. It needs to be over that. I do think there's a good place for AI to live where it's less than $5,000. It's transactional. It's PLG led. It's like, hey, I wanted to sign up and use it. But I think once you start spending real money, that's when you want to have a conversation with somebody, especially if you're going to spend, over $5,000-$10,000 for a piece of software or for a tool. As that changes, I think that that'll always exist. Maybe the goalpost moves to $10,000 and 10,000 below becomes AI. I just think that the face-to-face conversation has to happen, especially if you're going to have success using a tool.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think it's a little unfortunate around like sort of the sales, conversation sometimes to people. You're right, get on a demo and it's like, I mean, there's such focus on conversion and just trying to drive the person through. And what I like with your guys' approach is what sales should be is I have a problem, you have a solution, and we have a conversation about can
Yeah.
you help me? And are you the right person to help me with what I have? Versus trying to jam someone through a demo. We can do all these sorts of things and never really understand the prospect's pain points and is it working and why did they sign up? So exactly what you just said is how what sales should be. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, I guess the Wolf of Wall Street approach, right? It's all about, that hard conversion rather than connect them. And I think that's
Yeah.
critically important, right?
I mean, if you look at like attribution as a whole, I mean, yes, like we can look at like what the last touch was, if it was social, if it was an ad, if it was an event, like no matter what that last step is, the first step for almost any software out there is like a conversation took place where somebody in a meeting or face to face told you about a tool that you're like, oh no way, I didn't know they did that, or like, oh, like I haven't seen that tool yet. And like at
Hmm.
that point, you're like, oh, I should go take a look. Like maybe at
Yeah.
that point you went to the demo button or you went through like an ad that you saw button. So
Hmm.
that is like word of mouth is the most powerful way to sell anything. And I think that by making it
Yeah.
even easier for people to have back channel conversations or peer-to-peer conversations is gonna get only bigger as the years go by for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel as much as more people are adopting tech, I feel at some point, well, I kind of almost think there'll be a snapback. I don't know if that's going to be true or not, but it's almost
Pendulum
when
swings back.
just when is it too much, right? Like when do we just start saying, hang on a second, we were talking about our kids, right? Just before this, and it's like, we want our kids only interacting with a screen, when they're our age at some point, probably
Yeah.
not. I think there'll be a line where we find that balance. And I guess it comes into my next question is like, do you see companies trying to over automate the go-to-market processes or is that sort of the push, the sort of the undercurrent, for lack of a better word out there?
Yeah, I think that's the push for anybody right now, especially if you're an SMB client or a mid-market client. It's like, hey, like let's get people signed up as fast as possible. And especially with AI companies. I mean, the amount of pilots that are out there that are taking place or just signups that have happened,
Hmm.
and you just hope people adopt them and use it. Like there's not a whole lot of disco now. It's more like, oh, this is a perfect ICP. I should try to sell them. And like, yeah, like maybe you have amazing product market fit. People sign up, they start using it. But like, are those accounts growing or are they always staying the same size? I think that's going to be
Yeah.
a problem down the road. If people are buying very expensive software, like I don't know, let's take like an SAP or like a Salesforce. I still think there's a salesperson involved, like as the deal
Yeah.
size is so large. But I think automating SMB is interesting. There was a post I saw like forever ago that was like if you order like a $19 pizza, like you can call and get a person on the phone, but you
Hmm.
can't do that when you're buying software. Like that's kind of
Yeah.
crazy, right? I mean, like have like a
Yeah.
15-minute phone call. I forget who posted that. It's probably like Lempkin or somebody, but I thought it was a really good example as to I understand trying to automate SMB and like that makes
Yeah.
sense, but I still think there needs to be an option to have a conversation with somebody if you need it. And I don't think an AI bot solves that yet. Maybe it will someday, but I think people want to have a face-to-face conversation with
Hmm.
somebody that's a human before they move forward.
I also think it's true about what if you go back like in your business plan, right? Like what is your mission, vision, and most importantly, your values, right? So I do think at some point, you're right, we'll be able to have bots that will be able to replicate us to a T,
Totally.
but it won't be real, right? It's not
Yeah.
authentic, it's not genuine. And I think when we get to that point, that almost feels like when there might be a snap back to say, hang on a second, have we gone too far? So it's nice on the P&L because, oh, I don't have to pay somebody this and that. But then you go back to the values of why do we start businesses or do the things that we do and try to solve problems and provide solutions. And it's sort of, to me at least, I'll speak for myself, it does feel gross. So I think there's a point where it can get overdone, and then I think it could be incongruent with your values. Some companies will be all about that, and that might make sense for stuff that requires RPA. But I think to your point, when it comes to sales or customer service, I'm not so sure that should be, at least my personal opinion, on it, to
No,
be
yeah, I
rising.
agree. I think that's why conferences are becoming even bigger than they were in the past because people are hungry for in-person conversations and
100%.
being like, hey, like, and it's hard to find. There are so many tools being spun up every day, especially with like how many AI wrapping tools are out there. Like, oh, we took ChatGPT and wrapped it into something, and now we're a coaching bot. And like, there's
Yeah,
10,000 of those like every single week, and it's great. But like, how do you know which one's actually legit? How do you know which one's going to be around in a year? How do you know, like, which ones are
yeah,
your friends using? And like every single B2B site has like this logo carousel at the bottom, and everyone has the exact same logos in it. And so it's
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
who's actually having success in this tool? So what do? Is you're like, okay, I got to talk to a peer, I got to talk to a customer. And like I think the customers that are or the softwares, the tools that have the most success are the ones that invest heavily in conferences, the ones that invest heavily in their customers and helping their customers grow, the ones that at conferences they have their customers running the booth, not a salesperson. I think
Yeah.
like those little tweaks of like making you very customer driven, I think are the ones that win in the long run, and you build a successful company, not just a company you hope to sell in 6 months.
Yeah, 100% agree with you.
Yeah.
I'm in the group with Ryan Dice, and he did a presentation, and I feel this is where we are, where the phone companies were and the automotive companies. Like when those industries started, there were literally hundreds, if not thousands. I forgot what he said on the slide, like a crazy amount of car makers, a crazy amount of telephone companies. And as you fast forward through time, you kind of get like how many car companies we have in the world now?
Yeah.
Maybe in the whole world, less than 100, right?
Yeah.
Like you conclude all third world and all that, like not a lot, but at one point there were thousands, which is impossible. So there's a website I follow. Well, I don't really follow it anymore because you just get lost in it, but called futuretools.io. And it's like it's an aggregator of all the things that go on. And I got referred to a company, but what I think is going to happen is this happened to us for our company. We used it. We used the software. Going to be really good for AI and agents, and it was going to be helpful for what we needed on the back half. But then they ran out of funding, and
Mhm.
so I think you're going to start to see a lot of funding evaporation, a lot of bankruptcy or acquisition. While we're going to go into this crazy wild west of, like you said, everybody's wrapping stuff with wrap. At some point, we'll get to probably in the next couple of years where you'll have the few, and I'm 100% in alignment with you, is those that have the human touch to it are the ones that will survive through that. I just that's what my gut tells me.
And there's I think it was like this company called Winning by Design, this kind of Yako who talks a lot about stuff, and he gave a really good presentation. He talked about how like in like the early 1999s, 2000, it was all about like how many users you could get. In 2010, it was all about how many app downloads you could get. And right now, it's all about like AI companies want lots of users, but the problem is like when you sell SaaS, the cost dips for the company because you're not having to redo software all the time. The problem with
Mhm.
AI is it's a cost of goods sold play where like the more customers you sell, the higher your processing cost is. And like
Mhm.
unless they can figure out how to lower that, I know that that's what so many companies are working on, like OpenAI. Then there's going to be a bubble of like, hey, like it's not going to work because like you're
Yeah.
going to have too many customers that are costing you too much to maintain,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is going to
Well,
be interesting.
and the usage is like AWS. If you use their servers and all, it's on a usage basis, right? So a lot of these companies are charging so cheap, but they don't have a path
Yeah.
to your point, they're not focusing on their customers to get more customers. They don't have a path to profit. And then, lo and behold, 12, 18 months in, they wind up going bankrupt, right?
Well, yeah, well, there's no enterprise method. It's more like they have, 120,000 users that are from a bunch of different companies, and like 5% of their 100 million ARR is enterprise, and like that is an awesome spot to be in. You can hunt all day, and that was those one-time users. You can try to pair them together, but
Mhm.
that just takes time. And like I think you need to your customers have to have a inherent desire to want to be your champions internally.
Yeah, I love to focus on customers because they're the biggest, they're the lifeblood of any business, right?
Yeah.
I find too many people focus on tech or focus on what the competitors are doing. And I was having a conversation with a former Disney guy last night, and this might be a concept, and it kind of ties into your next question, because I know you guys are growing very fast. He had this concept of how can you be unreasonable? So this whole concept of there was one, I forgot the name of the company, but he said, unreasonable hospitality, like just be completely unreasonable in how good you are in the hospitality side. I think it's a concept that Disney deployed. but then it was all around unreasonable consulting or unreasonable sort of software services. So what you're kind of advocating is a little bit unreasonable in the sense
Mhm.
of it goes beyond reason that the customer should be that advocate, right? And but it starts to make sense when you peel it back. Like um, for yourself and your guys, is like what is, you're currently right now, you're obviously growing very fast. You're focusing on something that I think hits in the core of humanity. Your sort of biggest operational or cultural challenges that you're finding as you're kind of scaling.
Man, I'll try to pick one. The
Yeah.
the interesting, like, scaling is, it's funny when you talk to customers, like the ones that get it right away. They're like, oh, I need this, I need to put this in place, are the best ones. But there's a lot of them that don't get it, that they're like, oh, like my customers would never do this,
Mhm.
or like they're very afraid of like poking the bear, and they're like and that term being used, where like they have all these customers that use their product, but they don't talk to them. And so they're like, oh, like we should have them as experts. But we're afraid to even ask them to do that because we don't talk to our customer base. And like you'd be amazed by how many companies we come across that this they don't talk to their customer base. And so we're like, oh, we'll help identify experts for you. And like that is a bad problem, because like as we've scaled, we come across a lot of companies that want to do this, but they just don't know who to reach out to. So
Mhm.
that's a very interesting one. uh Onboarding takes time. That's like our internal biggest problem, because like we can easily add the software, but the thing that takes the most time is just helping identify and adding those experts in there.
Yeah.
uh so that we've tried to get better at. We tried to like hire folks who can help with like that process internally.
Mhm.
And then I think probably like the last like issue is that this is a new way of doing sales. Like people are very used to like, hey, book a demo, like have a disco conversation, and then have a demo where you don't show the product. And then like on your second call, like you try to set up the next call, and like people are used to like that process. And like
Yeah.
that's the way pipelines are designed, that's the way stages are designed, that's the way Salesforce and HubSpot are designed. And that is broken. And like there's been no adaptation to that at all. Like
Like
I'm
20
coming in,
years.
yeah, like I'm coming in saying, hey, your first step should be talking to your customer. And if that goes
Yeah.
well, then let's like either close them and like they go to the CSM team, or they go and talk to sales from there. And then like your deal, it's already hot. They've already had that conversation. So they move through the pipeline faster. And so like
Mhm.
because of that, that is our biggest hurdle, is changing the entire process for companies that are like
Yeah.
used to like the qualified, like proposal, contract sent. And like I think that that's like, going to be our biggest hurdle the next couple of years too.
Yeah, it is very different. And I also find, because I want you to walk us through sort of a mock example of this,
Yeah.
so people can understand the process. I want to touch a little bit about the customer side. So I did my exec MBA at the Jack Welch Management Institute out of Washington. And I've always knew about it, but I never really gained as much appreciation about the concept of NPS,
Yeah.
Net Promoter Score, which is basically talk to your stakeholders. Like,
Yeah.
would you recommend us to a friend? Why or not? It's like a simple question, but it's such high correlation. And so it's most companies know about it, but they don't do the NPS survey on their staff, on their partners, or their customer. And so I think that you have to be completely obsessed. And I agree with you. Too many people are following the traditional traps of, the sales process and the product, and sometimes you forget about the user. But I always say, who holds the wallet? Right? Like who is sort of sending money across the line, and
Yeah.
not the customer. And I think now more than ever, I would imagine, from what I've heard, but in my experience, the sales process is just generally harder because there's just more distrust, right? And I think people are more knowledgeable, but then they're also more confused because, like you said, there's all these things getting wrapped. It's almost like, oh my God, all this craziness. So I really love the human first approach because it's like, okay, we had a conversation and you kind of say, this is my experience, and it just completely flips this thing upside down, right? So I think that's,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, like, who are you? Like, the big thing that we always look at as software companies is like, who are you competing against? And you look at your competition, being like, oh, like we're competing against like ABC company and these guys too. But like, who we think you're competing against is the back channel. So people that are going out there asking and trying to find information on your company and reading reviews, and all of that's taking place without you knowing it. And so then someone might read a bunch of reviews about you and talk to a friend maybe, and then like they're like, ah, actually it doesn't solve my problem, even though you might like, so you're so dependent on your content. You're so dependent on like what your reviews say. You're so dependent on like all of these things. And like, that's pipeline that most marketers never see. And so all of a sudden when someone goes and takes a demo, like that means cool, something was good, but they've already done 80% of the research, maybe even 90% of the research. And so like, that's a very hard thing to get in front of. And so they're coming in as somebody who's already asked about you, and you need to figure out what they know and what they don't know.
Interesting. Can you spend a few minutes walking us through how you approach a client, like how it sort of a day in the life of, your sort of
Yeah.
your process, just so the audience get a feel. Hey, I'm going to call Braden up. This is how it's going to go based on your experience, your average customer experience, if you will.
Yeah, what we look for as a good customer as ours is like, you have like a book a demo button on your page, and you have like a case study, or you have like a bunch of case studies. You have a really good like resource section of like, hey, here's a bunch of really great success stories of these individuals or these companies using our product. Like, those are kind of like the first two steps. If you have that on your website, you're a great fit. You should test out what we're doing. And when we go in and have a conversation with you, what we want is like, where that book a demo button is a button right underneath it. Or even if someone hangs out on a page for a little too long, there's a pop-up saying, hey, you should talk to a customer. And on that page is a whole directory of certain individuals that are geared towards that prospect. And they have a little button there when they're open time. So their calendars are all sucked in. So you can actually book a time directly on that page. So what we do is we work with a lot of companies to figure out like who those customers should be. And like, are they willing to suck their calendar in? Most are. And then if that's the case, awesome. Like, let's make it very easy for prospects and customers to connect. Let's put that ability to on your web page. Let's put it on your deal rooms. Let's put it in your outbound sequences, and try to encourage, we call them expert conversations. When those calls take place between a prospect and a customer, all that data goes into your Salesforce or your HubSpot. It's like, hey, Braden came in, booked a call. Here's that call. Here's the recording of that phone call. Here's insights from that phone call. And all that is like basically brought right to your forefront. So you can use it for building content. You can use it for building testimonials. So it's a pretty easy process to get set up. The pieces that take time is trying to identify who those experts should be. So we'll suck in your CRM. We'll suggest like, hey, here's some people based on criteria you gave us that would make great experts. So we do a lot of work to make that easy. So you're not having to figure out like who your experts should be. Like, we'll make it pretty simple in that process.
Interesting. I find what percentage of companies know who their best customers are? I would imagine a small, like 9 out of 10 don't, kind of thing.
9 out of 10 don't. They know that like they work with like Meta as a like Meta as a customer, great, but they don't know like who at Meta is the advocate of theirs. So like, that's usually the piece that we're trying to figure out for them. Like, is like someone willing to take a phone call for us at Meta, or are they not? Is a good example. Sales usually has a handful of people in their back pocket that they use for references all the time, that are burnt out, that have done these calls so many times that they're like, I don't want to do it anymore. And so that's the use case we typically walk into. References are like, I love you, but like, come on, like, I don't want to do 5 reference calls for you a week, or even 5 a month. Like, I'll do 1 for you. Sales kind of controls it. Sales, like, the process we're typically replacing is, there's a Slack channel where like a salesperson goes and they're like, hey, I need a reference for a insurance company. And then marketing hopefully gets back to them and sends them somebody. Then the email intro is made, and then it's off into the abyss, and you hope that they talk, but you're unsure. So you're following up, being like, hey, did you guys talk? How'd it go? And so like, that's a lot of the process we're typically replacing.
Feels like technically, when you're marketing out there, or or account-based sales, you have who you're looking for. So, but then you're not mining it. To your point, they're not talking to them once they've crossed the line to be a customer. It seems like there's a huge gap between all your materials, or your ICP, your ideal client profile, or avatar, whatever you want to call them, but then they don't actually know what percentage of them make it, or what they like, who they are, like who their stars are, right?
Yeah, sales usually, like, if you're a very good AE, you've maybe built a relationship with a certain sales deal, maybe you just hit it at the right time, and so you've stayed friends, and like, that's where all the references go. Or you had a friend who left the company and went somewhere else and bought your tool. And like, that's your reference. And like, which is great, but that person can only take so many phone calls. And
Yeah.
eventually they're going to be like, I'm done. Like because like they're usually not thanked. They're usually it's like throwing a problem over the fence. It's like, hey, like, here you go. Like, go talk to Braden. And you're like, this isn't my problem. I'm trying to help you close a deal. And so we try to make that process easier. This is post sales. Like that
Post
same
sales.
person
Yeah.
should be like a post first demo. That person should be used on the front of this on the front of the funnel too.
So I guess what's your recommendation for, for people who are building a company, for like I guess how would someone who's starting up, or someone has a great idea and they want to deploy this type of methodology, um, what do you recommend? Because obviously if you have Get Demo and you're already a going concern and you've got some business, that's probably your ideal client. But for those who might not be ready to work for you,
Yeah.
but they want to start, what would be your advice for the startup to say, hey, make sure these 5 things or whatever? What advice do you have for those who aren't ready for you, but
Yeah.
you want them to grow and be ready for you?
I think it's just talking to your customers. Like once someone is set up and on board, I think to have conversations with them. I think to have a spreadsheet of like, hey, here's our 5 referenceable customers on there, and like to go in between them when you're asked for references. To not be afraid of it, I think is a big one. Like if you're a small SMB, people are taking a risk on you, or if you're a small startup, people are like, I think I want this, but I'm unsure. So use a reference right away. Like be like, hey, you should talk to one of our customers, and like just make that intro. Like you don't need a tool like ours to do that, especially if you're someone who's just starting out. Like have advocates, have advisors, have partners that are willing to do phone calls. Like the third party conversation works really well. Like I remember like a long time ago when I was starting out in sales, we used to do like we sold like a $2,400 a year software product. And if you're on the fence, we'd always be like, hey, like talk to my manager, like maybe the one off your especially just hand the phone to the person next to you. Like they weren't a
Yeah,
manager, but it was a third party voice that like
yeah.
just helped somebody be like, oh, like, okay, I'm not talking to someone who is motivated to sell me. I'm talking to, someone who's, it's amazing how the different voice helps deals move along.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, that makes sense because because they probably don't have a necessarily direct vested interest. So it can be a little. They might
Yeah.
feel they're more genuine about it, even though
I,
you might be in the first place. But
Yeah, exactly. So I just think that like that's an important thing and you don't have to have a tool like ours to do it. You can do that on your own, and this make reference as part of your process
yeah,
or
I think
earlier on, not on the end when you're trying to close a deal and you're like, oh, can I have a reference? And you're like, okay, and you're trying to scramble to figure out who to introduce them to. Yeah.
what is the time? Like to your point, 9 out of 10 don't really know what it looks like, and so in your particular instance, does it normally take a couple months to figure this out?
Yeah, I mean, like it typically takes like to get setups fast. Identifying the expert part takes a month to get them signed
Mhm.
up because like they get an email saying, hey, like ABC company is rolling out an expert program. And everyone's like, what's that? And so like that takes a month to get enough people on your page to go live. Like we recommend at least 5 people on that page to go live for sure.
And then are those 5 people typically cap those experts? Like in terms of, if I sign up, let's say I'm a user of your
Yep.
product and I'm one of the 5, when you rotate through them, do those experts sign up? I'm good for 5 a month.
Yeah,
And then you
exactly.
can automatically pop them off the screen, or your
Yeah.
system can track, okay, they're
Yep.
expired for this month, pop them back up next month kind of thing.
Yeah, we suck on their calendar, so they decide when they want to do phone calls. We also can base it on NPS scores, and if someone has a very low NPS score or an open ticket, we can pull them from the page automatically too. So you can make it where it's very easy to make sure the folks on there be the right people you want to talk to a potential customer.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
I think the NPS score, I think it's for those who don't know, NPS score is what you recommend this product or service to their friends and family. So if someone is a 6 or below, they're a detractor. If they're a 7 or 8, they're sort of neutral. They're happy with your product, but they won't be what they classify a promoter. And then if they're a 9 or a 10, they're a promoter. So what Brady, you guys would look for who are the 9s and 10s. If they
Yep.
drop below that, pull them off. Even if they're an 8, that doesn't make them a promoter. They're not a bad customer whatsoever. They're just happy and they're not a a raving fan. You kind of got
Exactly.
to find your nines and tens.
Yeah, exactly. Like your nines and tens, you kind of figure out as you go along, and like it changes too, which is why you do MPS constantly. Or there might be an
Hmm.
open ticket in Salesforce. They might be really angry about something, and like you
Yeah,
don't want that person talking to a prospect, and so we pull them from the
no.
page.
I think to your point of being real time, because things do shift, people do shift, and
Yeah,
things happen too in business. So you're right, you catch them, and as a company, we sometimes right,
yeah.
and so shoot, you pull them off. That makes a lot of good sense.
Yeah.
Now, yourself as a founder, and growing a business, as you know, is not easy. What do you do to sort of keep yourself balanced and not get distracted by all the things out there, so both personally and professionally?
Yeah, right. And having a kid too, or a young kid, I find that like a good balance is like to know like what your escapes are and to know when to shut down. But I didn't like, so this is my second startup, and like my first one, a lot of those didn't exist the first time around. And like this
Hmm.
time around they do, where I'm like, hey, I know if I'm burnt out, like I gotta walk away. I gotta go
Yeah,
work out or go for a run or go for a walk or do a hike or something and then like I need to remind myself constantly that I'm not a brain surgeon. I'm not like performing a delicate brain surgery. Like I'm building a
mhm,
software. Yes, it's cool. Yes, it helps people like close deals, helps people like build out great companies. But at the same time, like I need to not take something so seriously. And that's a hard thing to do because you
really
live
hard.
so close to it, and you're like, oh, this is everything. This is so important. But in the grand scheme of things, you're like, okay, I'm not like this isn't I don't have a person's life in
Yeah,
my hands. And so like
yeah,
as horrible as that sounds sometimes, like I think it's important to remind yourself of that, or you're gonna freak out and not have a clear head. And so like knowing what
yeah,
your escapes are, knowing that like, hey, what you're doing is important, but hey, like you're not, have a beating heart in your hands. And like probably the third thing is to have like a plan, like to know, like like for me, like deadlines really work. Like I'm like, all right, I know in a month I want to be here with the company. I know in 2 months I want to be here, and like have that mapped out the next 3 months is
yeah,
extremely helpful for me. And to know like what my OKRs are personally and with the company. I have co-founders, I always have. And so like if you need to vent, I know like I can do that with my co-founder. I've known him for a long time. So if you
yeah.
do have co-founders, to make sure you trust them, because they're the person you probably call as much as like your partner. And
Sure.
if you do get in fights, which you will, to know like how that other person reacts to it. Like I've had many screaming matches with my co-founder where, it ends with like an FU, and then like you walk away, then an hour later, you're calling each other and you're like,
Yeah,
that got hot. And like, so it's almost like a brother or like a
yeah.
sibling, I think is like important to like remember. I don't know, like that's always helped. Like I've known my co-founder for a very long time. And so we've had some good matches. I've seen that person get married or seen them have kids. And so like, it's important to remember that there's a relationship there and I trust them, but a fight's never a bad thing.
No, I agree. I really love what you said about having a plan, and because it's really important. 'Cause my experience is most people just go all in on
Yeah.
something, and then they sacrifice everything else. And all my research says we got one life, right? So we've got to balance the here and the now with the future. And I think it's really important as founders and executives to have someone. So like I was actually having this conversation with someone yesterday. I said I've got the one person that when I'm about to blow a lid, like you got to blow the lid. Like you got to have that debate or that frustration, because I think keeping it in is actually harmful for your health. But you got to
Yeah.
have that trust, and where you can kind of, I got to blow a gasket, and they'll know how you blow the gasket. Like you just said, it perfectly said. Like you need maybe one, maybe two. That they kind of know everything, and you got to say, all right, and maybe they'll call you out, on your blind spot. We all have blind spots, smart as we might be,
Right.
got them, right? So,
There's a thing my wife and I do. So my wife's in tech too, is we have two. So we go for walks, and like there's and like if you're having a bad day, there's two speeches you can give. So, and like you get asked before, I'm like, oh, I'm having a bad day. So she goes, okay, like what kind of speech do you want? Do you want hey, like freaking sack up and like you're running a company and figure it out, and like you have an opportunity to go build something, so like you should put your head down and power through? Or
mm,
do you want hey, you're right, it was a hard day, like you should take some time, so the sentimental approach? So you have like the
mm.
hard approach or the sentimental approach. And so it's always based on like when I'm like, I had a hard day. She's like, great, what motivational speech do you want? For some
I
reason,
love
like
that.
we've done that for like 15 years. And like usually I ask for like the sack up one. And
Yeah,
she's like, freaking sack it up. She's like, you are out there trying to like build a company. Like not everyone gets that opportunity. So like
yeah,
freaking put your head down and do it. I'm like,
yeah,
okay,
cool.
that's fair.
Yeah, it's funny. I love that tip. I had this from the guy I talked to last night, Don. He had the same concept where he has these type of conversations with his wife,
Yeah.
and he lives in the Orlando area. And we were talking about Tampa Bay and Clearwater, whatever. And it's like Tampa Bay, it's only like 4 or 5 feet deep. Not so, and you can only go with the boat across when it's high tide or low tide. So what they use is a couple, and I thought, oh, this was useful, and maybe with our partners, like wives or friends, is
Yeah.
it low tide or high tide? High tide is like, okay, give it to me, right? Like I've got energy to have this conversation because the other person may or may not be in a position to give you either of those speeches. And so what he says with his wife has had enough or he had enough. He's like, honey, it's low tide. Like, I can't do this right now. Let's park it. Let's do it on the high tide tomorrow. So I actually thought what you just said with this low high tide thing is sort of
It's very similar. It's like it's exactly similar. There's like
exactly similar.
yeah, like what color you are. If you're like green or if you're red.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's another one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hit that one about. Um, yeah, I was just gonna ask one question about rituals. You kind of just answered that. Let's see if I can go through. Like, how are you finding the market once they're over the hump of using experts in their business? Because it's probably somewhat against the grain, against the
Totally.
sort of total training. The Are people saying, "My God, why didn't I do this sooner?" Because usually that's the feedback you get. But how long does it take
Yeah,
before they get to that point?
it takes a little bit because like I mean it depends. Like I think that like there's two camps. Like camp one is like this is brilliant. Like I need this. Like this is like let's get this set up immediately. And then camp two is like I like this, but I'm nervous about something. That might be I'm nervous about like putting my customers out there. I'm nervous about using references further up the sales funnel. I don't know if my customers would do this. And so those are ones where it's a typically longer conversation.
Mhm.
Uh, which is fine. And I think that like we've helped a lot of those folks over the line. Some of them are still thinking about it. Some of them are still like I get comments like, oh, like we should use our customers this way, but I want to gate them, which is fine. I think that like we've seen that work really well where it's not front and center, but it's more like behind the scenes and after a demo takes place, you use a customer. So I think there's a lot of ways to approach it. It just depends on the company and like depends on the person and if they're willing to risk it.
Sure. I guess before we close out in a few minutes, what I like that you've done is most people use their customers in their marketing material. They use it in videos or testimonials, and to your point earlier, it's already happening through word of mouth. And
Yep.
what I love that you're trying to do is create a system to systemize those conversations and sort of reward those folks because I think it's a little bit different when someone gives you a scripted testimonial or written testimonial versus, you got 5 minutes for a chat. You have no idea what any person's going to ask or what any
Yep.
person's going to say. I also think for a company that does that, it puts extreme trust in themselves and their product and how to take care of the customer because you wouldn't put if you don't believe in what you're doing, you would never even you would sort of to your point completely shield your customer, right? And you sort of never expose them. um, but we all know on Amazon everyone buys 4 stars or above, right? But there might be some really good 3.9 stars out there, right? And so I think it's what you're doing is really awesome and kind of bringing those conversations to the forefront because
Thank you.
I think it's great.
I was just at a conference and at the conference every single booth looked exactly the same. It almost looked like their website where it was like the name of the company, whatever it is, and then they had like all the logos that use them, all the social proofs. And so you're
Mhm.
supposed to be like, "Oh, I don't know that company, but if all these guys use them, then that's cool. So I should talk to them." But like
Yeah.
I keep thinking about like imagine if a customer was standing there, not just the logo, being like, "Oh, I use these guys. I like them. I'll tell you how I use them." And like how
Mhm.
much more powerful that would be. And like that's
Mhm.
what we're trying to basically make more front and center.
You're completely flipping the concept is social proof, which everyone wants
Exactly.
and needs.
Yeah.
But I love what you guys are doing because you're completely flipping it, right? Because
Yeah.
it's unexpected. And I think it's disruptive. So if you follow the theory from Clayton, I'd never say his last name, the guy from Harvard, the sort of concept of disruptive innovation, where it's sort of sometimes it's about cost and low entry, but it is disruptive. Because if you're a traditional customer, you're going to expect, you already know you're going to go down this funnel. You might get ninja hacked with 27 follow-up emails. And
Yeah.
I even find myself stopping to do that because I'm like, I'm kind of curious, but not that committed. And I just want to talk to somebody, but I don't go down the rabbit hole because that's what it ends up being. I end up going down this labyrinth of funnels, and then I got unsubscribed 16 times before it actually unsubscribed. So I love having you on the podcast because I think it's flipping the script on how to do social proof versus the way it's always been done. Because at least I find myself and many other founders and executives that I know, like myself, I almost feel like those switches are starting to shut off, right? And they're starting to shut off. And when you see something like this, you're like, I can talk to somebody. Well, that's kind of crazy. Like,
Yeah.
let me do this, and it's not right. So
Cool. Well, thank you. It's good to
yeah,
be here.
yeah. Thanks. And any before we close off for our audience of sort of 7 to 9 figures, exec and founders, any other closing thoughts or advice you want to leave us with?
No, I think you nailed it with the question, like, do I have to buy your tool to do this? And you don't. I think like just try it with your customers and your prospects and try introducing a customer earlier on in the sales cycle and see how that goes. I think secondly is connect with me. I'm the only Braden Young, Braydan, on all of LinkedIn. My parents got creative with my name spelling, so I'm the only one out there. So connect with me, and if there's things you agree with, disagree with, like send a comment with that, because I think like that's what I enjoy, is like the debate as to where sales is going, and appreciate the time.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I've got the funny name with David as well, too, with the E at the end of it. It's an
Yeah,
Italian spelling, but it's silent. So it makes us different and stand out in the world of sameness. And I really appreciate your time and how you're serving the small, medium business market and above with your solution. And yeah, let's just, I'll put all your referral links. So I'll put all your
great,
stuff in the show notes so people can find, they can click, go straight to /expert, straight to your LinkedIn profile. I'll pop that in, and I really appreciate you coming today and spending time with us.
awesome, thanks.
Thanks. Have a good day.